All right, good morning, everybody. As always, I'm Ginny Davis, principal of Piedmont Hills. Welcome to Zoom with the principal. I missed you guys last week. We did not have a Zoom with the principal last week. Several of you came to our LCAP presentation. And I really thank you guys for doing that and for giving your input. I know those type of presentations aren't always the most exciting. You see a lot of data for the school and the district, but we really do value parent input. So I do appreciate the parents that came and gave their input. So what I have planned for today, I'm actually going to be giving you guys and showing you a presentation that I've given to the staff several times this year when we have our collaboration days. Often or once a month during those collaboration days, we have what we call like PDC choices, where they can make choices from the professional development committee on various topics. And so the presentation I'm giving you today is something that I have presented to the staff several times this year. It's based off of a presentation and training that I attended. I don't know if you guys remember. There's no reason for you because you probably haven't memorized my schedule, but if you do remember, in October, I attended a conference in Philadelphia. And I was gone for a better part of a week. It was a Title IX conference. And so the presentation that I'm going to give each day was given to me during this conference. It was one of the sessions I attended. And I'm not going to lie that as the parent of a teenager and as a high school principal, it alarmed me so much that I've made it my mission to educate the adults that work at the school, but also you guys as parents about what is going on and what's out there so that you know and are able to hopefully protect your kids. And so that's the presentation that we are going to do today. Hold on, let me share my screen. Word of warning about this presentation. It's going to make you feel icky. Some of the stuff that we're going to be talking about is not happy things. It's can be really yeah, it's you're not gonna leave this presentation today feeling great about the world and what's happening on the internet. But that's okay. So the point is to learn about all of this. So the title of this presentation is Snaps, Sex, and Sex Ed. And what we're going to be talking about is technology facilitated sexual abuse and how it relates to Title IX. So I'm going to start actually by explaining a little bit about Title IX. So first off, what is Title IX? Title IX is a section of the Civil Rights Act that was signed into law by Richard Nixon in June of 1972. And it really is one sentence that says no person in the United States shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any educational program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. So as a public school in the state of California, we do receive money. This Eastside Union High School District does receive money from the federal government. Therefore, we fall under Title IX. So Title IX is, for a lot of things, it's why we have to have an equal number of female sports versus male sports. That's really like when you talk about Title IX and like history, a lot of it like equity and athletics in colleges, but also in high schools, started in colleges, but then and went to high schools, is really like where like most people associate that with Title IX. It is also how it's the law that like as a high school where we investigate sexual harassment, sexual assault, all of that falls under Title IX. So that's the connection with this. What's interesting about Title IX, like I just said, it's a gender equity law. It was enacted as a follow-up to the passage of the Civil Rights Act in 1964. How it relates to equity First off, equity refers to the understanding that not all individuals have access to the same resources and opportunity. Equity focuses on providing support and resources to reduce disparities in the access to the education program. So Title IX seeks to remedy inequities in sexual harassment and that sexual harassment and sex discrimination create. So that's where Title IX falls under this. What's interesting about Title IX, like this one sentence that I showed you, what happens is the federal government creates what's known as regulations that all basically anybody that receives federal funding has to follow. So us as a school district, we have to follow Title IX regulations. The current Title IX regulations that we follow is 700 pages. So they take that one sentence and interpret and say, this is how all of these organizations have to follow this, and this is all that it means. That one sentence translates into 700 pages. A little interesting tidbit about the current Title IX regulations that we're all under. They were written in 2020. They were released in 2020 under the Trump administration. The Biden administration has not yet updated the Title IX regulations. So the current Title IX regulations are still from the Trump administration. So one thing, and like people that, follow this sort of thing are saying that, the Biden administration is probably waiting until after the election to release their new Title IX regulations, because these things do become political issues. There's a lot of, especially like with transgender students in sports and bathrooms and like those rules. And remember, this is a federal law. So these are like going to be for the entire country. So there's a lot of politics that go with that. I'm giving you guys a little background on like politics and history and everything that goes on with this. The point of all of this and why this is important is in high schools, and as Piedmont Hills and the Eastside Union High School District, when we have to investigate any sort of sexual harassment amongst students or students versus staff, God forbid, or anything like that, sexual assault, which is, awful. All of that falls under Title IX. And so it's a different level of investigation that happens, and we handle it differently than, say, we would handle an investigation about drug sales. So things that fall under, like, that are sexual harassment and sexual assault fall under Title IX, and there's a different set of rules and regulations and procedures that we have to follow with Title IX. Okay, so welcome, Miss Gunter. I don't know if she can hear me. Welcome, Miss Gunter. I just taught them all what Title IX is. So now we're going to get to the good stuff. We're going to be talking about technology facilitated sexual abuse. And in this, what we're going to learn about today, we're going to learn what online sexual harassment and cyberstalking is. We're going to talk about gender-based hate speech. We're going to talk about the use of a carriage service to procure a sexual assault. We will talk about virtual rape, which is something I did not know existed, but it does, and it completely freaked me out, not going to lie. We will talk about the unauthorized creation and distribution of sexual images, and we will talk about the creation and distribution, actual or threatened, of sexual assault images. How this presentation works, just to give you guys, like, the first half of it is a lot of definitions. And so I'm going to present you like online sexual harassment. I'm going to give you a definition and explain what that is. I also, in all of the slides, when I created this presentation, I did basically I typed in online sexual harassment and did a Google search of news articles. And so I've clipped on each slide like headlines of recent I actually made this presentation back in November. So that's when I did that. My Google search history for a little while was like really crazy because I was searching all these terms. But this stuff is definitely in the news. Okay. So I did that just to like kind of prove the point that this stuff is, you hear about it all the time. All right. So let's get started. And then if you.
Hi. Did you leave any package for the phone?
Oh, I'm going to hold on.
I'm here.
Hold on.
Oh, that's nice.
There we go. Sorry about that. You guys put questions in the chat. While I'm in presentation mode, I can't really see the chat, but I will get to them at the end, okay? So online sexual harassment is gender harassment, for example, inappropriate sexual jokes, unwanted sexual attention, unwanted sexual comments, sexual coercion, like for example, making requests for sexual harassment. This is becoming very, very common. Online sexual harassment is kind of an umbrella term that everything that we're going to be talking about, and I just realized I've done this presentation, like this is the fourth time I'm doing the presentation. I just realized I have a typo on here. So the online sexual harassment is an umbrella term that everything else that we're going to talk about today falls under. But it is unfortunately very, very common. Cyber stalking is the repetitive and unwanted communication or contact that is directed towards an individual through electronic means, through the internet, through social media, through email, other forms of technology. The headline I have on here, a U.S. soldier arrested for allegedly cyber stalking local judges. Cyber stalking does not have to be sexual, but oftentimes it can be, which is why it's like it falls under this. So it doesn't have to be sexual in nature, but it very often is. And then you have gender-based hate speech. Gender-based hate speech is dangerous speech, fear speech, or extreme speech directed at certain individuals or groups of people considered to be inferior based on core identity features or demographic markers, encouraging stigmatization of a person or group. Such hate speech legitimizes violence against targeted individuals or groups of people. And so this headline, offline and online gender-based violence, extremism, risk assessment tools, and the rise of the incel rebellion. Yvonne, I have a question for you. Have you heard the term incel? You're muted.
Yes.
Do you know what it stands for?
I don't.
Okay. So incel, if you guys spend a lot of time on social media, this is probably a term you've come across. You may not know what it means. It usually refers to single men who often engage in gender-based hate speech. Incel stands for involuntarily celibate. So meaning they're
I was
celibate.
so afraid to say it because I'm like, what if I'm thinking of the wrong thing? And
No,
then I
that's
just
what
say
it stands
that.
for. So it's men who are celibate, but not voluntarily. That's involuntarily. They want to not be celibate, but they are, and they tend to be bitter about it. So these are members of, this is kind of this online subculture based on the inability to find a romantic or sexual partner despite desiring one, and they're not happy about it, and they often are responsible for a lot of the gender-based hate speech that we see out there. Okay, our next term is use of a carriage service to procure sexual assault. So this is using technology such as social media or a messaging application to plan, coordinate, or solicit a sexual assault of another person, regardless of whether the sexual assault actually occurred. So that's an important, so here you have this headline where this man was charged over 98 alleged online offenses against children over a 5-year period. Didn't happen in real life, but online. So it's still against the law. And so basically it's like the planning and using technology to plan a sexual assault. Okay, here, let's talk about this virtual rape, because this is the thing. When I sat in this, I'll never forget, I was in this hotel in Philadelphia, sitting in this session and talking about this, and they talked about what virtual rape was, and I completely freaked out. So this is within the virtual world, like a video game, the metaverse, or virtual reality simulation. So this is like where people have the goggles on, like that little head thing. There's gloves that apparently can simulate like real touch, even though they may be alone in a room, but because they've got like, it's like this virtual world. And I've never experienced this myself, but from what I understand, it's very, very lifelike and very real, especially with the gloves that simulate real touch. So what virtual rape is when one or more people are using technology to have their avatar forcibly perform sexual activities upon another person's avatar without that victim's consent. And because of the virtual touch, it actually seems like they're actually being raped, though they're alone in a room. So here you have this headline where a woman is alleging rape in a virtual world. This is the type of thing that when I say I completely freaked out about this, because our kids oftentimes, like, this is something that's very popular, like this, like virtual reality simulation games and things like that, very popular amongst teenagers and college students. And us as parents that are older, this isn't something that we have any knowledge about, that we really know what's going on with. You like, oh yeah, my kid's just playing a video game. We don't really, I don't think as parents, we really understand what's happening within those video games. And so the fact that this can occur and even exist blew my mind. And I was like, I need to make sure that all the other adults that I come in contact with also know about this. I'm sorry, I hope I haven't like completely rocked your world, but I feel like I might have. Okay, so our next term is image-based sexual abuse. This is a very broad term. It's the creation and sharing of sexual or nude images or videos of another person without their consent. And so here you have a headline about revenge porn. So this is, in a revenge porn type scenario, a couple, usually they shared sexual images back and forth and it was consensual at that time. But then they break up. And in this case, her ex-boyfriend shared these images online without her consent. Like originally they were shared consensually, but then later on when he was, no longer with her, he shared them out there. And so this is why we have to, I think it's really important to caution our kids, like don't share sexual images. Just don't do it. Like, it's not worth it. Like, you don't know where that's going to end up later on. Just don't do it. And so then you have non-consensual sexting. This is forced sharing of nude images via text or messenger services. This is where I'm going to use some slang terms and probably shock some of the parents out there, but this is like sending a dick pic where, a woman gets an unwanted image of male genitalia. That's non-consensual sexting. They didn't ask for that. They didn't want that, but there it is on their phone. What I mentioned before, the non-consensual distribution, this is like revenge porn where you're distributing. So where the difference between the two, the non-consensual sexting is like you're sending an image to one person. The non-consensual distribution is the sharing of the images to the wider public without the consent of the person in the images. So oftentimes, revenge porn where images were shared because they were a couple, they, were together, they thought it was a fun thing to do, but then the person had saved the images or videos and then shared them out to the wider world. And with social media, it's very easy to do. Okay, this next term is sextortion. So this is the sharing or threat to share nude images or intimate images or videos without the consent of the victim as a form of extortion. So again, you send an image, you thought, it was all cool to send that image to somebody, but then they are threatening to share it to, the whole school or something like that, unless they give money over. The victims of sextortion, and again, this is as the parent of a teenage boy, I found this very alarming. The victims of sextortion are often teenage boys, where they, meet somebody online. They think they're, on like, an online relationship. Oftentimes they think it's a girl or whoever. And they are sharing images, and then it turns out it's like some like middle-aged guy that's just going to blackmail them. There's been really like scary reports of incidents of suicide as a result of this. So this is something that's like really, really scary and alarming. And you know, when we talk about communication with our teenagers and making it like where they feel safe coming to you, like I think on the internet, like we've talked about, like there's really good things on the internet, but there's really bad things. And this is something that I just find really, really alarming. And I want our parent community to have, you know, relationships with our kids where they like, if they fall into something like this, they feel safe coming to you for help. Okay. Next term, and I've just got a couple more terms, and then we're going to talk about like, what do we do about all this? So this is deep fakes or digital forgeries. So this is sexual images or videos creating using artificial intelligence-based human synthesis technology, which replicates or alters a person's features or body to make it appear as though the victim is participating in sexual activity shown in the images. This is very, very new. This is AI, where they're using fake images. There was something in the past couple months where fake images, nude images of Taylor Swift were put out. Very, very new. This is, you know, we had last year where the Screen Actors Guild was on strike. Like one of the things that they were fighting against was using AI imaging and protecting that so that you know, studios couldn't like use AI in place of the actual person. Very, very new. There are 0 laws about this so far. So one thing that we'll talk about is the technology outpaces the laws. And so the technology is happening very, very fast, and the laws are being very, very slow to catch up. Then you have recorded sexual assault. This is kind of like what it sounds like. Occurs when either the perpetrator or the observer record a person's sexual assault using one or more forms of video or audio recording device. What's interesting about this is it's not, so like you, obviously the person, like the perpetrator of the sexual assault, you know, they're the ones committing the sexual assault, but somebody that's just there recording it can also get in trouble. And so that's what this headline shows, where a teenager was given probation for recording a video of sexual assault. So, you know, even though they didn't participate in the sexual assault themselves. Okay, so why is this such a big deal, and why should parents know about this? Sharing intimate images is unfortunately very, very common amongst minors and adults. So 1 in 5 minors report sharing nudes. That's 20% report doing this. 1 in 3 minors report receiving non-consensually shared nudes of other minors. So that's even more common. 54% of women report receiving an intimate image. 47% of those receivers were unsolicited. 46% were under the age of 18. Right, so this is something that like this happens, and we need to be aware of this. Some other statistics for you. 7 to 17% of adults report having experienced, they're using a different term here, but NDII is non-consensually distributed intimate images. It's the same thing that I use the term IBSA, image-based sexual abuse. It's the same thing. It's just a different term. 40% of people in the United States report being 40,000 people in the United States report being sextorted in 2022. That's from the FBI. 17% of LGBTQ adults report experiencing at least one form of image-based sexual assault. Low-income adults and people of color are disproportionately likely to experience image-based sexual assault. And then 1 in 20 US adults self-report perpetrating image-based sexual assault. And I want to talk about that, and like, let's think about that. So this is 1 in 20 adults self-report, meaning they say, yes, I have done this. I have participated in image-based sexual assault. Says 1 in 20 admit to it. Imagine how much higher it is of the people that don't want to admit to that they've done this. So what are the consequences for students who experience technology facilitated sexual assault? The consequences, and Yvonne, like this is something that you could probably, in your experience dive into too. We can say the consequences fall into 3 big buckets. There's physical consequences, emotional, psychological consequences, and then of course, educational consequences. Talk about the physical first. So these are some things these are like common things to look out, like there's something wrong going on with your kid. But these are always like kind of red flags to look out for. Complaining of head and body aches, decreased or increased appetite, lethargy, struggle to complete basic self-care tasks, and increased use of alcohol and substance use. That doesn't mean it's necessarily image-based sexual assault that's going on, but there's something going on. These are red flags that we need to dig deeper and find out what's going on. The emotional and psychological effects, anxiety, depression, stress, isolation, loneliness, decreased self-esteem, increased feelings of objectification, increased suicidality. Basically, like, and they've done studies and people that are victims of like technology facilitated sexual abuse. These are like very similar consequences to like physical sexual abuse. So somebody that is like had this happen to them online and through the internet, it's very similar than if they were like physically raped, unfortunately. And then your educational consequences, poor academic performance, lower rates of academic retention and graduation, in higher education, because a lot of times, and I really want, we do see, unfortunately, we do sometimes see this in high school, but where this is becoming very, very common is on college campuses. And imagine that, they're in college and somebody in their major they have classes with is sending them these images and, they like it's unwanted and they feel like they need to change their major of that. Like think of the long-term consequences of like changing your major, changing the program you're in at school, much less changing your school, and the long-term consequences for your entire life because of that. Social isolation. And like I said, with those long-term consequences, there's potential and actual loss of income, social mobility, and social stability. So what do we do? How do we combat this? Step 1, educating the adults, which is what I'm doing today. Like I said, I've given this presentation to staff members. I think that as the adults in our children's lives, we need to be very aware of this. We need to educate the students. This says the school-wide lesson in the 5th grading period. This has actually changed. The school-wide lesson in the 6th grading period is going to happen on April 30th. We're going to do a school-wide lesson on healthy relationships that will talk about consent and the Title IX process on how to report all of this if something does happen. So in California, there is part of California state law. There is a requirement for sex education. This is something that the seniors are going to do. They're actually going to do it in a couple weeks. The week that we come back from spring break, when the juniors are taking the SBAC, the seniors are going to be participating in the sexual education modules. I think those are really important. I actually have kind of like, the more I know about this, my thoughts on this has really evolved. And I actually feel like we should do sex education 2 times in high school. I feel like we need to do it for freshmen and kind of a more like basic level, because I feel like freshmen don't really know a lot and like they're going through puberty and they're starting to like have feelings in their bodies. And so I feel like the freshman year is actually important to do some sex education, but then I feel like you need to come back around and do it senior year also before they go out into the world, before they go out into college, so that they like are better prepared. These stats I have on here are actually college stats. So many undergraduates come to campus for little or no sexual or consent education. we are lucky to be in California, that this is actually California law, but across the country, a lot of states don't have laws like that. Actually, a lot of states, they have laws like explicitly prohibiting any sort of sexual or consent education. And I think that that's a shame. Undergraduates are coming to campus with already established schemas about sex and gender roles and norms and social power structures. So really a lot of this education does need to come in high school because they go into college already like having like certain ideas of way things are supposed to be. And 17% of students are coming to campus or going on to college already having experienced this. So this is something that we actually do need to address in high school. And one thing that's, really important, when we talk about up here, the consent education, they've done studies, consent education is vital. Consent education actually works. And so that's why, as you guys as parents, when I talk about like talking about your kids about sex and consent education, it's been proven to work. It is very, very effective. So that is something that absolutely we need to do. So conclusions, technology facilitated sexual abuse is real. It's a growing problem for both minors and adults. Like I said before, the law is not keeping up with technology. Technology moves very, very fast. We live in the Silicon Valley. I think we're very aware of how fast technology changes. The laws are very, very slow to keep up. Many students will go to college already having experienced at least one form of technology facilitated sexual assault. Technology facilitated sexual abuse or assault awareness education needs to be increased in K-12, but also in college campuses. And like I said before, consent education works, especially when targeted to male-dominated and vulnerable populations. It's been proven to work. I'm going to share out this presentation with you guys when I share out the video for today. These are, good resources. So if somebody finds that they are like images are out there in the world, if they are under the age of 18, there's this resource to help get images taken down. This one also. And then there's this one for when they're older, because obviously like minors versus adults, there's slightly different rules, but there's things that can help. And then these are support resources for somebody that's been a victim of this. Okay, you guys didn't have any questions? I'm sorry. I know this is a very heavy topic. And like the first time I heard it, it sat with me for a good long time. And it's not a happy topic, but I think like this is something that I personally have actually become really passionate about educating the adults in the world, because I think that this is really, really important for us to know about. I don't know, Yvonne, you want to add on to anything about that?
Unfortunately, something that I deal with a lot, whether it's cyber related or just, sexual assault in general. And I think on a personal level for me, being a mom of 3 boys, it's very terrifying to think about things that maybe if I don't educate them on things that are against the law or make people uncomfortable, I mean, that's my responsibility to keep them safe from themselves and dumb decisions that kids make in high school. I always think like somebody is like one report away from, something terrible happening or them getting in trouble or things like that, that they might think is, innocent. And so I make it a practice in my house to talk about all the things that they hate to have to listen to me talk about, because I feel like it's my obligation to protect them. And I think we as adults in general, we just need to do a better job of, discussing it. Because when these incidents do come up, I've had incidents with like freshman boys who didn't know that they were being, harassing in nature to this girl that they liked and things like that. I always want to make sure that we're being proactive and get ahead of it before anything terrible happens. I can't speak to being a girl mom, but I know there's a lot of fears and worries and all the things in the same way. But just from my perspective, that's been something that's tough as a parent to even think about.
Virginia says at SJSU, we had to take a training every year so that we understood what's right and wrong and how no is no. And that's great. I'm actually really happy to hear that. And I think that, again, I feel like living in California, I feel like we're actually very lucky that there are a lot of laws, and colleges in California are going to take this very seriously. Unfortunately, this is not something that's consistent across the country. What are the statistics of sexual harassment and assaults for Piedmont? What's the reporting structure like? I don't have statistics. It happens. We don't widely publicize it. And so when it happens, usually oftentimes it gets reported to Yvonne, very often. So what happens in like for the investigation, like I said, there's like a different type of investigation. We have in the district a Title IX coordinator. And so what happens is when we hear something, we don't make a judgment call on whether or not it falls under sexual assault or sexual abuse. Sometimes it's obvious. Sometimes it's a little bit more blurry. And it doesn't necessarily like, it's not quite as so clear cut. So we refer any sort of case like that, an allegation like that, to the Title IX coordinator for the district. She comes out and she does a preliminary investigation where she asks questions, and then she makes a judgment like, is this, does this fall under Title IX? And we have to do a full Title IX investigation. And then there's a whole process with that. As staff members and administrators, so the staff, every year, the staff is trained on this. As an administrator, I have like a different level of training that we have to go through because oftentimes we're the ones that like it eventually comes to. So I want to reassure you, like our staff is trained on this on a yearly basis. My freshman daughter has been getting Snapchats, Instagram for a while. I'm so paranoid about her getting targeted by a creep that I won't allow her to have any social media accounts. It's not that I don't trust her. I don't trust the bad people on the internet that target teenage girls. It's tough because she says social media is how their peers communicate with each other, so she feels left out. Of course, I don't want her to feel left out, but I also want to keep her safe from predators. It's a constant argument we have in our home. I totally feel you. And I think it's harder with girls because I think there's more pressure for girls to have social media. My son, who's the same age as your daughter, has absolutely no interest in social media. And I'm like, oh, awesome. Great. You don't want it. But I feel like girls, they want it more. I know I'm gonna be completely honest with you. I don't know if this is a fight that you're gonna want to keep having. As she gets older, you said she's a freshman, right? Yeah. So as she gets older, like she's probably going to wear you down. And that's okay too. I do think there's benefits to social media. I don't think social media is all bad. I think there's very bad things on there. And so I'm going to share out this presentation with you guys. And so I think doing this and like showing this to your kids and like showing, and so having an agreement, like if you get to the point like, okay, let's compromise. You're on social media, but I have to have access to your social media accounts. I have to be your friend on social media. Like if you're going to have Instagram or Snapchat, I also am on Instagram and Snapchat, and I can see everything that's going on. And like having like open communication and teaching her about the icky stuff out there and how to guard against that and how to block people and how to report stuff. Any Instagram, Snapchat, any of those, like it's something, you can report people. So oftentimes they'll like report it to me, but I'm like, I'm not in charge of Instagram. Report it to Instagram. Like, and they will like flag that account and they will like, put a block on that account. Like these companies will do that. They don't want this sort of thing to happen. I don't know, Yvonne, if you have any different advice than what I just gave. You're on mute.
Oh, sorry. No, not really. I was kind of reflecting on somebody asked about statistics, and one of the things I just wanted to bring up is I do get most of the reports for, sexual assault and things like this. Honestly, what I see mostly of have to do with images and dating relationships. Something happening within a relationship where one person is saying it was not consensual, the other one wasn't. That's mostly what I get. So I just wanted to add that.
Yeah. I I would say, like, you know, like talking to your kids about the image, like, I mean, God, these teenagers do stupid things and they share really inappropriate things with each other. And so I just like, you
Follow it
know,
with everybody on text message, and then everybody shares it. It's
I
just
know,
terrible.
and it's just so bad. Like, I just, you know, I like maybe just like ingrain in them, like, don't put something out on social media or an image. Don't text an image to somebody that you wouldn't show your grandma. Like, you know, like just be very, very careful about that sort of thing because they think that that person is somebody they can trust. But then now they've sent that out in the world and they don't control that image anymore. And that's like the biggest thing, and just really like teaching them to be very, very careful about that sort of thing. And that's not just through social media. I mean, that's just texting. Like, so like I hear you about social media being a concern, but if they've got a phone, which they all do, any of this is possible. So,
Yeah, you're right. Most of the drama that I see or the issues that I see are via text. And then what will happen is the text messages will get screenshotted and posted to social media. So then the whole world sees it. So I mean they're both the problem, but texting is definitely I just can't tell them enough. Like every text message you send, like imagine it one day in the court of law. Like how would you feel about everybody saying that, you know? And they don't listen.
but we keep saying it because hopefully at some point they'll get it. Yes, yes, you've got your hand up. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Lynn, go ahead.
a couple years ago, I went to the police. The police went to school and they share about this thing, but I don't remember a lot. But they said that when the image is on, they put it on, it will be on the cyber, on the cloud. So when the kid apply for anything job later on, so if they investigate it, they see that, so they will affect your future.
Yes, absolutely. And we have in the past had the police come out and do presentations. We haven't for the past couple of years. I don't know, like the liaison, if they're still actually doing that. But that is another thing, not just like putting stuff out there, but like posts that they put on social media. Like, yeah, there are definitely examples of people not getting a job. But there's like in recent years, examples of people getting college acceptance pulled because of things that they post on social media. And not just like we're talking about sexual abuse today. So not just even like a sexual nature, but like racism and things like that. Yeah, Rupert, yeah, juvenile probation, but we did have SJPD presenting too, but maybe it was in with probation. They had this like presentation that they did. We should look into that for next year. Because we had
We
them.
haven't had that presentation since Shakanya left.
Yeah, no, we didn't have it after that because I know we did it my first 2 years as principal, but then like things like the pandemic, it's one example where the pandemic screwed everything up. So because we stopped doing that sort of thing because like everybody was like, you know, super like you didn't want to have that many people like, you know, all together. And then like it's just something that we haven't picked back up in, but I'm gonna make a mental note to myself to look into that. Again, all right, I have to wrap up. I know this is a heavy topic. If you guys have questions, feel free to call me, not call me, send me an email. I am more than happy to like answer any follow-up questions that you may have about this. I am no way an expert, but I have like, this is something, like I said, it's become this little passion project of mine. So this is something that I'm like educating myself about. I will send out this presentation later today. And next week, we do not have a Zoom with the principal because it's spring break. And so we're not going to meet next week. The following week, we will meet, and our topic is raising an independent teenager. So kind of like I'm like thinking about raising an independent teenager with everything that like we just talked about, where you want to put them in bubble wrap and not let them out in the world. How do you deal with like still letting them have that, freedom, that they want as a teenager, like the parent that said that, her daughter, like, this is a struggle. So how do we deal with this? So that's going to be our topic for next time. Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate it. And thank you for the great questions. And I promise the icky feeling that you have goes away. Okay. Bye. Thank you.